Welcome everybody. This is a great turnout. And this is the first Sister Bay story of Sister Bay Stories from the Sister Bay Historical Society. It's also part of a new event called History Days, Door County History Days, that the Sister Bay Historical Society and various other groups have banded together to raise the profile of history in general in Door County and encourage people to enrich their vacations, and residents too, by appreciating the rich, diverse, and multi-ethnic history of Door County. So I can't think of a more apt topic than Bunda store, because this is a history that reaches back in the 1880s. The family is still with us in many guises, including a very successful retail store operator named Mitch Larson, who still occupies Bunda Store's building in Sister Bay. So this is, people often ask, does history matter, or why does it matter? This is probably the clearest example that I can think of, just because we're talking over 100 years of history, development, people's life stories, etc. So welcome to this. Thank you. Thank you. This woman has put a lot of work into this presentation, so let's give her a round of applause.
Hello and welcome. I first want to say thank you so much to Terry, Fred, and John for helping me out throughout this all presentation and getting it all together. So I'm very happy to be here as far as the Sister Bay Historical Society. And I also want to thank the Bunda family, you're going to make me cry, for blessing me with this opportunity to do this. And thank God for Audrey for listening and making me go through pictures and telling me detail. Pat also helped me out, Pat Bunda, with some dates. And thank you, Mitch, for so many nights on the sofa when I was peering in at pictures and looking at details. When you're not family and when you're a fresh set of eyes, sometimes you look at things a lot differently. And so I beg your patience for everything that you did. So as far as family members, I'm trying to go down the Bunda family. Bunda family, can I just have you raise your hand? Who's here that's a part of the Bunda family? Up high, up high, up high, up high, up high. Relation to the Razor family. There we go. Burns. And Jiski. I'm both. I love it. Okay. And my name is Janie Denis, and I'll be presenting most of the presentation today, and then I'll hand over the microphone to Mitch Larson, and he is the gentleman in the blue shirt. He is the son of Audrey Larson, and Audrey, as we work our way back down, you'll come back down to Audrey Bunda Larson for tonight. So Mary and Wenzel Bunda, they started what was called the Bunda store. We see them as a defining family that built a Door County business. And we're going to go back to the 1880s. And Mitch had asked me to try to find a period outfit, and here I am. So I've grown to enjoy and love Mary Bunda for all of her strength. Thank you, Mickey Carlson from On Deck Clothing Company, who lent me this beautiful outfit. It's a wedding dress, that's right. So we're going to start with the present before the past. And everything is about, if you guys know the On Deck Clothing Store, I'm going to take you back in history to that piece of property. And it has an amazing history. So John, I do need you.
When I bought the property, I immediately got together with my architect, Mark Isaacson, who's helped me with all of my projects throughout the county. This building to me just didn't seem to fit in the community. It seemed to be too big, one big long storefront. We really started working right away on what we could do to change the mass to the building. Growing up here, it was all little small shops. There were no big stores. The biggest store in town was maybe the Wilkie Furniture stores, all small little shops. So I always had this vision that this thing needed to be broken up individual stores, little storefronts. That was really the plan from the very beginning. And every time we work on a property, we try to always put it together so that it could be something else. Each one of these storefronts now could be 5 different businesses. And we've done that really in all of the communities where we've renovated buildings. We've set them up so they can be split apart. We actually really kind of went overboard. I actually first built an actual to-scale model, which I've had for a few years, just standing back, sitting at the bowl, like, what's this gonna look like? And then Mark's brother Jeff does 3D architectural renderings, so we actually had Jeff make the building come to life in 3D. It's always one thing on paper, but then as it came together, it turned out better than I could have hoped for. It has that small town charm. We broke up the massive storefront. The little details, you know, the different are from buildings that were here 100 years ago. So we tried to look to the past for some of the architectural feel. Very happy with how it turned out, the quality of the construction, and the community has really embraced what we've done here. I've gotten many compliments, and especially from some of the old timers that have been here a long time. I really appreciate those comments.
Thank you everybody for coming. Appreciate it very much.
And thank you, John Nelson, for him and his company for helping us make that video. It's amazing what a time-lapse camera can do when you strap it to the side of a light post across the street. So who are we going to follow? We're going to follow Mary and Wenzel Bunda. And then we're going to follow their youngest son, William Sr. And then we're going to follow William and Alma's daughter, Audrey, who's here. And then we will follow Audrey's son, Mitch Larson. So that kind of gives you a snapshot of how we're going to move forward. So what we know is that Wenzel Bunda was born in 1863, died in 1899, so at the age of 36. Mary, she was in 1868 and died in 1947, so that put her at age of 79, and that's her as a much older woman. So let's get to meet them as a young couple. Do I look a little bit like them? So in 1985, Mary Warchek wed Wenzel. They were in Kewanee when they wed. They moved from Kewanee to Sister Bay. And in 86, 87, they opened up a general merchandise store, from what we understand, in the Razor family boarding house, which Audrey Larson will tell us that that is the oldest building in Sister Bay. And they were there briefly in 87, then they purchased the property. So I'm always going to reference back to the on-deck clothing women's section. That particular piece of property is what they bought. There was a building there. And then in 88, they put Bunda on the front of the store. And basically 11 years later, Wenzel passes away. So they say that there's 2 historical accounts that suggest that Wenzel had a weakened heart. And they said, you really can't farm. You're going to have to find a different profession. And Susan Armour, who also used to work here at the Historical Society, suggested that it was Mary who gave the directive saying, let's just move, let's go open up a general merchandise store. So that's what brought him to Sister Bay. Wenzel's condition right now, in today's terms, would probably suggest that he had congestive heart failure. So following Mary, now that we're in 1899, now that she finds herself a widow, she has 5 children. And in age, we have, oopsie, let me just go here. She has Anna, Mary, Leona, and William. She will have a son, Edward, who dies more or less close to childbirth. So Leona, the oldest, will marry Bill Burns. And if anybody knows where the Village View is, that is where that they took up shop, correct? Right. So the oldest one, okay. Mary would wed Martin Jiske, and they reside where the Roots Inn and Restaurant is. And then Annie would wed Elmer Highlander. It's a farm out, then they took up farming outside of Sister Bay. And the youngest there is William Sr. He would wed Elma Witalison. So those were her children. And all of them had to work in the store because now we have to remember that the youngest son, William, he was less than a year old when his dad died. So now she's left with those 5 children to take care of. Following her, this is what really got me intrigued with her, is that I looked to Mitch and I said, Mitch, you have an awful lot of strong women behind you. And I'm going to get to the story. So the postmasters, we have a lady named Anna B. Dickinson. She was in the post for a year. And then later, Wenzel, Mary's husband, took the postmaster position. When he died in '99, his brother took over the postmaster position. And then we find out that we see Mary Bunda took it over in 1905 to 1915. And then later on, she ended up giving it to Martin Jiske, who was her daughter's husband. Is everybody following me? You're not falling asleep yet, are you? Because I love this stuff. I love it. So the historical reference for women's right to vote, and we're going to go back to this, is that 1919, 1920 is when the amendments and the ratification was passed. What happened in Sister Bay, and the Sister Bay Historical Society gave me this letter that was written, it was an article in the Democrat in 1893, October 19th, and it talks about how a postmistress of Sister Bay is in a state of active rebellion. I promise it's only this long, but you will be intrigued by the time I get towards the middle of this article that was put in by the Democrat. So it says, the postmistress of Sister Bay is in an active state of rebellion. As a general rule, the postmasters of 4th class post office recognizes the fact that their continuation in office depends upon the political success of a party in which they belong, some of them being so faithful to their party that upon a change taking place in the administration, they resign their position. Sounds familiar. Resign their position, preferring not to hold office until their political opponents. Under their political opponents. Until recently, we had never heard of a postmaster who refused to give up his office after his doom had been sealed by the appointment of his successor. It appears, however, that Wenzel Bunda, who was recently appointed postmaster at Sister Bay, having considerable difficulty in getting possession of the office, Mr. Bunda received his appointment a couple weeks ago. And after filing his bond and completing the other necessary preliminaries, he started out on Monday to become the postmaster. In reality, he called upon the former occupant of the office, Anna Dickinson, for the purpose of obtaining the official records of the office and the other government property, and was somewhat surprised to find that the doughty female absolutely refused to yield up the documents and announced her determination to hang on to the office until removed from it by main force. This was a condition of affairs for which Mr. Bunda was, to say the least, totally unprepared, and he was compelled to beat a retreat for the time being. He telephoned the postmaster Harris of the city to find out that he could be done in a case of kind, and the only thing for him to do is to report the matter to the department at Washington, when they will take steps to give Mr. Bunda his office. Just how will they go to work to do this is not known. A regiment or 2 of the regular army might be sent up here, or Mr. Bunda might be authorized to roll up his sleeves and take possession of his office by main force. It is hoped, however, for Mr. Bunda's sake, that the latter method will not be chosen. Did I mention that Anna was a widow? And this was her job. let me continue on with the article. We would like to ask if this is the condition of affairs that is going to obtain if we allow the women of the country to vote and thus elect their fellow women to office. And then it continues on. Will a man not only have to hustle like blazes to get elected to an office, afterward organize himself into a standing army and kill off his fair predecessor with a baseball bat or a Winchester rifle before she will give up the ship? If so, hadn't we better call a halt before it is everlastingly too late? And then I wrote up there, I said, final statement. And this is what the article then said before it was posted. Just before going to press, we learned that Mrs. Dickinson had capitulated and Mr. Bunda is now in peaceful possession of his post office. So she had to give up the position. This leads to many interesting conversations I end up having with Audrey and Mitch. I went, oh my gosh, do you realize that by the time Mary Bunda comes, and now she's a widow in Sister Bay, and now she's the postmaster? This woman had the audacity to hold a women's suffragette meeting right in front of her store. And if you look on the awning, it says Mrs. W. Bunda. And if you look above the awning, Sister Bay Post Office. So that we do know that it was 1912 that when Catherine McCullough stood in front of Mrs. Bunda's store and spoke in favor of granting women the right to vote. As a single woman and business owner, the impact of Mrs. McCullough's speech must have been powerful. We do know again that that was just before the fire of 1912. And very nicely now, if you see the lady in the front over on the far side, that is Mary Bunda pictured there with all the postmasters. So I like this lady. She's kind of neat, don't you think? So I'm going to step back away from the person, and now I'm going to get back to Sister Bay and the buildings because we see so much of that. So as I mentioned before, in '86, Wenzel and Mary they moved from Kewanee, they go to the boarding house. We got the vision that they open up a small merchandise store in the Reiser boarding home. They purchased the property that right now is on deck, that smaller square area where the women's section is, and that's the corner of Maple Drive and North Bayshore Drive. So they purchased the property in '87, and the only thing we know is that in '88 they put their name on the front of the building. So interesting, though, I know Jeff even said, Fred even said, I wonder who was really in that building before the Bundas have it. So if you don't know the Razor building, that is the Razor building right now that is on the corner of Maple and something. So they talk about that in 1887, the birth of Sister Bay's busiest corner, the intersection of Maple Drive and North Bayshore. We have Bunda's building here that we all know of, Husby's, which was Frank Bunda's and also Lerner's. This is going to be the Sister Bay, the Bowl, or the Sister Bay Hotel. And Audrey talked about how this had many hands, a blacksmith, and a livery for horses. That's where old horses go. So that's an interesting view of what it looked like. And then I just switched the camera angle around so you could see the gentleman standing in that far porch. That is going to be your Sister Bay Hotel. So we know that this is all before 1912, before the fire. Upon looking at the pictures, this one building stood out because it's got the little peak on it. So we assume that this is between 1887 and 1912, is that this is what the Bundas basically ran their store out of, dry goods and grocery. And we do know that this image is probably between 1905 and 1912 because Mary's got her name on it, It says post office on it, and that would have happened after he died and after she got her postal assignment. I love the horse in the background. The inside of the building, this is a picture that is very prominent in the Historical Society. So we know that this is closer to 1910. I sat with Audrey for quite some time thinking about the dates on this. We know that daughter Mary, so Mom Mary is on the far side, daughter Mary is standing on the right side, and we think that she's probably about 18 years of age. She was the one that married the Jiski, and she would end up working in Bunda's till she was 90 years of age, so she kept following the family line. And she definitely looks the same as she does the tallest gal on the side. There is a book that is for sale back there on the counter, and I took this one home, and Mitch said, you have to read this story. So it's about the pioneer women of Sister Bay, and in the machine shed, there is 9 exhibits of these type of framed art where it talks about the cloth, about the clothes that women would wear. And each story is a page long, and I'm going to read the one about Mary Bunda, and that's going to lead me into the fire. So this is a rendition of how Mary Bunda was thinking and acting at the time. It had been a busy day at my store that Friday, the day the fire burned through Sister Bay. Looking back, it was hard to recall details. Who came in to buy, what I sold, but I do remember rushing through my lunch. What with all the tourists coming in and out, the end of July was like that. Folks visiting from the big cities, getting away from the heat. They like to shop for bits of this and that, said my general store was quaint. I suppose it's simple compared to the department stores that they're used to down in Chicago and Milwaukee. But I never for a minute thought it was simple. The store was important to me. It was what I had left when my husband Wenzel had bought the store in 1887 and opened it up under our name a year later. Looking back, I couldn't believe how young we were when we went into business. Maybe Wenzel knew he wouldn't live long and wanted to provide for me and our children. He was smart. My husband was always thinking ahead. The fire struck during the night, close to midnight, as I recall. From all accounts, it started in Louis Lerner's store up the road, Husby's. Never did hear what exactly set it off, but the winds that night were fierce, and we couldn't keep up with the flames. We all tried so hard to fight the fire, but it was bigger than any of us. I can still taste the ash in my mouth, feel the thick heat prick my skin. My face was covered in soot that I didn't know who I was when I looked in the mirror. A total loss. Everything was gone, burned up. No time to save much of anything, my accounts, the merchandise, nothing. I did rescue the mail and some valuables from the post office at the back of the store. As postmistress, I was responsible for anything in the post office, but the rest of it, all of that was left was ashes. We took our counsel with each other, those of us who were burned out. We wrapped our arms around each other and cried. As I reflect back on the tragedy that befell our community that night, I wondered at the courage of the faces of such devastating destruction. We had all worked so hard, preserved for so many years, and watched in horror as it all went up in smoke. It isn't that I am ungrateful that that no lives were lost. I thank God that we all had made it through the night and the difficult days that followed. But to look upon the charred, smoldering ruins of my business, it was nearly too much to bear, and yet, what choice do I have? A woman alone. So I rebuilt my business. I worked hard every day. I even took in laundry. I did what I needed to do to provide for my children. And in 1920, when I sold to my son William, the store showed a profit. Maybe a woman didn't have the vote yet, but we knew how to work hard, be strong, and provide for our families. The vote will come for my daughters and my granddaughters, and I will be proud. So they say that the fire struck in Sister Bay and destroyed the community. And according to the Door County Advocate, the property was a total loss of $37,000. Only half of it was covered by insurance. So this is the book that I read out of. It's just a great book. And if you want to get to know about those particular families and life stories. This is the best photo that we have of the Sister Bay fire. And this is if I'm standing on the deck of the Sister Bay Hotel, and Bunda's is over here, and I'm looking straight down. Husby's is here. I'm looking straight down that road. It's funny because it looks to me like it should be snow on the ground, but you have to remember this is summertime. So whether that's all water and ash. So it took out all the main buildings, the Sister Bay Hotel or Sister Bay Bowl, Husby's or Lerner's, and Bunda's or on-deck clothing. Audrey, was there anything across the street that took out, like where the livery was?
I don't know.
Okay. So after the fire, the Bunda's rebuilt. And this is where I studied my pictures. Now the rooftop in the front is flat. And the storefront still says that it's Mrs. Bunda. It's a post office. So it's definitely between 13 and 15. And I love the interesting contrast of you see the horse and the buggy. And if you look straight down the road, do you see the car coming up the road? I thought that was rather... And then looking further down, now you see Husby's, Bunda's, and then behind Bunda's. You see it's John Paul hardware store, I believe it is.
Yeah, you can see it.
Okay. Now I'm moving away from Mary and her buildings. Now she's passed the baton on to her son. So this would have been her youngest son, and I reference him as William Sr. So he enlisted in the war, returned back to Sister Bay, and in 1920, Mary sold the business to him. In 24, William would marry Alma, and Alma was a teacher from age 14 to 24. Interesting note that once you marry a woman, does have to render her job in that era. So you see the three children going left to right. The eldest, you have William Jr., Bill. You have son Jack in the middle, the youngest. Son John. They reference him as Jack. And then you have Audrey, who is with us here today with Mitch. This is one of my most enduring photos. I love watching this couple and wonder what they're looking at, this group of people. So we're guessing this because the facade on the front is different. You have the Bunda store. You now have, it's an IGA, Independent Grocers Alliance. So they're growing. They keep continuing in dry goods and grocery. And again, you're looking at basically where On Deck Women's Store is. William now starts expanding to the south or up the hill. And we do know that he makes this into a more dedicated men's department. And this is the only image we have that says that this is the next time the Bundas have a store that burns down to the ground. So this is what the store would look like in 42 when it burned down to the ground. So Audrey's dad, for about a year, does interior remodeling. He does all of a fresh startup. Audrey talks about Dad was so excited he bought grocery carts because it was the new thing. And he was going to have a grand opening, and they were in the back of the store, and they noticed that the fire had started, and they couldn't get it done. They couldn't put the fire out the night before the grand opening. And we even have newspaper articles that talks about the grand opening. And then it burned all the way to the ground. So now what the Bundas have an issue with, 42 to 45, is World War II, and they can't rebuild because of the rations for building. So they do a temporary relocation to the north side of Sister Bay where JJ's and the waterfront is. So they take up shop there. And actually the newspaper article says like in a week later he's taken up shop on the north side of Sister Bay. In 1946, Bunda's now becomes a department store, Rexall Drug. So he is able to rebuild. It is understood that he worked with some architect. He kind of wanted to bring in that fresh look. And this more or less shows that they're getting close to opening up after the big rebuild. So he now leaves the grocery component and now starts getting into Rexall Drugs. And Alma and William Sr. by the 1940s, talk about an entrepreneur. William would expand the stores to 4 locations: Sister Bay, Sturgeon Bay, Oshkosh, and Plymouth. So that's quite an endeavor. So now I'm going to start moving a little bit away. I'll come back and forth a little bit, but I do want you to meet Audrey. That's you? That's you? So I want you to meet Audrey. She was born in 1931, and she's in her middle teens here, and Fred and I started looking at the license plate this morning, didn't we? Was it 38 on the license plate? And she's with her best friend, Emerine Razor. So, whose car is this?
Probably my dad's.
Dad's. So it's Highway 42 looking up the hill. Isn't that sweet? I love that. So Audrey was a hellion. So when her brother did get off the war, she goes, oh, I go, well, Audrey, let's try to figure out what year this is. Oh, no, Janie. I was driving. I must have been like 12, 13, 14. I took the car. Those are with all my friends. So there again, she's hanging out with her friends. And if you see it in the background, see that little gas station? I believe that's Husby's filling station now, right? Right? Audrey's husband would own and operate that briefly as a gas station. One of Audrey's most affectionate memories is working the soda fountain. I mean, who doesn't remember soda fountains, right? That was the big thing. That was the big social. So I have an opportunity every once in a while to go through Mitch Larson's storage sheds, and he goes, oh, well, that's the old soda fountain machine. He's kept everything. But Audrey said that everybody from Sister Bay would come and sit at the counter bar, and then they would have their sodas and their ice cream, right, Audrey? The other interesting component, and I love this little guy right here, hanging on the wall. If you look on the side of the boat, next to Chris Craft, do you see that little life preserver? That's the Bun E. In 1949, the Bun E is a 35-foot Chris Craft boat. This was a boat trip to Mackinac, and Audrey goes, yep, there were 6 couples, 4 kids. I was 18. And if you look at the boathouse in Sister Bay, Audrey's father built that boathouse. So it kind of goes into a lot of interesting roots with the Bunda family. And it was this love for Chris Craft that, for some of you who've been in the Sturgeon Bay on deck and Fish Creek on deck, you'll find a Chris Craft boat in there. Kind of goes back to Mitch's heart. So I'm going to quickly talk about the expansion of the building. So if you look over here, I have a house. And I kept watching this drainage pipe through some of my pictures I was looking at. So we have the Rexall drug. So we know that, as far as that picture, but he hasn't expanded this footprint yet. And this, again, is still Audrey's dad. So you are looking at now on deck men's, women's section. This picture is interesting because I just like the color where you see up above the awning. My little mouse is right there, but so it's the late 1950s, and you're looking north, straight down. You can still see that it's a hotel. It's not the Sister Bay Bowl yet. And if you look at Husby's, you see that sign on the side of the building? So if you, what?
It's Plex.
Plex. Plex ice cream? So I remember when Mitch Larson put on the orange crust sign on the side of the Sister Bay store building. Kurt, you probably had to help him with that, didn't you? He's like, I need to have a sign because that's what Sister Bay was. We all had like signs on the side of our buildings. So I like that from the color standpoint. But Audrey talks about how they ended up moving that one house to the north, to the south up on top of the hill. That allowed William to expand. And still, because of the 1942 fire, his men's department was still sitting over where the creamery is now. Just a couple doors down. So he was able to move that now back up to the main store. And then that big Rexall sign that hangs there that looks like it's sticking out, and you can find that in his Sturgeon Bay store. Mitch Larson is all about preserving his history, and I just think that's so beautiful. So I'm going to move away now from Alma and William, and here's the transition. They have now their 3 adult children. They all continue to work in the business, just like Mary's children did. So from there, we ended up having Bill Jr., and in '73, he became the owner-operator of Bunda's department store in Sturgeon Bay. Like his dad, Bill would also dabble and open up a couple other smaller stores in Sturgeon Bay. I'm going to jump down to John, or Jack as we affectionately know him. In '63, him and his wife, Pat Bunda, would build and open up the Hutch, which is presently the Fish Creek Heights site. We have Pat Bunda here. And then in '73, Jack would be the owner-operator of the Sister Bay store, which is presently what you see now. So he would have that. Audrey would continue to be a part of the Bunda stores before and shortly after her marriage. She continued on and working in Door County and businesses as her life continued. Now I'm going to introduce you to Audrey as she got married. So now we have Harold, or everybody affectionately knows him as Wink Larson. They married in '55. And what they did initially is commercial fishing, owner-operator of the Shell, or that Husby's filling station. And then he moved into real estate. Audrey and Wink Larson, their 2 children, we have Lisa and Mitchell. They would also be a part of the family business, but does anybody not know about the ski hill that used to be just south of Fish Creek? Who does not know about the ski hill? Does not know. There was a ski hill there. And in the fall and the winter, Little Sweden, if you look up the hill, you can still see the runs. And it used to be a ski jump. Used to be a ski jump. So Audrey and Wink bought the property and made it into a ski hill. So this is Wink Larson. He's over there skiing, and you're seeing a lovely picture of the Ladies' Day skiing at Knorr Ski Ridge. So now you can see all the ski runs that are up there. So the family, interesting enough, and Audrey will tell you, everybody came there. Everybody. And the winter entourage of Door County was signified by their ski hill. And to make ends meet, during the summer, here we have Wink Larson. They would do fish boils at the ski hill. So they had that till '73, but just before they sold the ski hill in '72, Wink and Audrey bought an apple and cherry orchard north of Sister Bay. The couple would sell that to Mitch, the processing plant, as far as I got understood, to Mitch and then Dale and Jim Sequist. And we kind of know the Sequist name, yes? Cherries? Okay. And I have question mark. I don't think Mitch and I got to understanding when he finally sold out his shares to Sequist. Do you remember? No. Okay. Now, Winkwood died in '87. Now I'm going to start transitioning over to Mitch Larson. Here we have a young man of 29 years of age. And he's got his mom. And mom needed Mitch. And it's been a wonderful, wonderful relationship since. Now this particular picture looks like there might have been attending a wedding. It was actually the eldest daughter, Lisa, was her wedding. Wink died in 87, daughter got married in 87, and there's Mitch with his, isn't that a lovely picture? It's such a lovely picture. I'm going to quickly breeze through this because in about 2 minutes I'm going to hand the microphone over to Mitch. So he is going to talk about what really happened to department stores because we really had an awesome thing going here with the Bundas and the Bunda family. The transition from him from the orchard onto retail and finding his way through, and he was jumping through many different doors to try to find that right door so that he could successfully find and run a business. And that how Audrey was always there by her son's side during the most difficult startup years, counting money, doing everything she could, just like any Bunda would do. So I just think that he's like, yep, Audrey's like, I was there doing everything and helping what I could do for my son. So the sister-based store almost comes full circle. And I have this in the back. And I put this article together several years back. And I'm just going to read about 5 sentences here. It says, if you ask Mitch Larson, owner of On Deck Clothing Stores, to answer why Door County, you might experience a slight pause, an enduring reflection before he speaks, with admiration of great-grandparents, grandparents, parents, aunts, and uncles before him. Quote, it seems so surreal. A warm sensation came over me as I signed the bank papers and was presented with the keys to my parents' cornerstone property. So that was pretty neat. The property was actually sitting vacant. Nobody was knocking on the door. The bank actually came knocking to him. And he's like, this was not just about 4 walls for me. It was about family lineage, my history, a community history, and generations of steadfast commitment to Sister Bay and the shores that define her. So I'm going to say that this man, just like his great-grandparents, grandparents, parents ahead of him, he would acquire, this is the Fish Creek Market. And if you notice that greeny, grassy area between those 2 buildings, he would eventually build onto that and build the women's section of On Deck and Fish Creek. It looks like an old store if you walk in it. Next time, look at the floor. Look up above. And Mitch goes, oh no, this is all brand new, but I made it look old because I believe in preserving and making things look like history. So he does his remodeling, he does his research, he uses everybody local. And remember I told you about the Chris Craft? He'll work with people like Kurt, who has to take out a window in the store so Mitch can get the boat in the store. And then he bought a second boat, so he had to take the bigger boat out of Fish Creek, put it down Sturgeon Bay, and put another boat back in, right? Yeah? So if there's a will, there's a way that Mitch can get it in. And he sure did. So there he is. He's buying back the old store. And I think I'm coming back almost full circle. So as I leave, there is just one friendship that is so special in this room. So along with, we have Al Johnson. We figure this picture is about 1983, and Wink Larson. 2 defining Sister Bay figures, and with their wives and children continue to hold dear what keeps Door County beautiful. Then to Al and Wink's son, of course, Audrey, and Ingrid, right here. Lars Johnson and Mitch Larson. Lars Johnson is in the back, and you 2 have been boyfriends as far as like little kids, I meant to say it that way, since you were little. And on August 18th at 7, you're going to also have the Al Johnson presentation. So I am going to hand the microphone now over to Mitch, and I would love for him to tell you his strife and his passion for everything that he's done for the family.
about a tough act to follow. Well, Janie covered a lot of my history, but I'm just going to touch on a few highlights. I grew up, I've had an interesting life. My mom and dad had a ski hill. In the summertime, we had the fish boils. We'd be on the beach having fun, and we get plucked off the beach to go peel potatoes and build fires for the fish kettles. Child labor. It was a fun time. It was a family business, and like Janie said about the time they sold the ski hill, we were in the orchard business. So I grew up in the orchard business and eventually ended up working with the Koessl. But the interesting part of my retail career is it started with John Ostrand, who is to this day a long employee of Al Johnson's. And John had Talmark Boutique behind the restaurant, one of the buildings that Alan Ingrid had brought over from Norway, and a little tiny men's store. And John didn't like to drive. So whenever he had to go to a trade show, he'd ask me to drive. So I'd drive him to Chicago, or I'd drive him to the airport. We'd go to Dallas. And I started to really show an interest in the business. So John and I decided to open up a store, which was about 1987. We would put down a payment on one of the new units at Top of the Hill shops. I had no money at the time. I refinanced a car for the down payment. Those were meager years, and John and I opened up the store. And I was working full-time in the cherry business, and John was full-time at the restaurant. So we gave it our best shot, and we opened a second location in Egg Harbor. And after about 3 or 4 years, we looked at each other and said, we're not making any money at this. So, John said, well, why don't we just sell the property? I said, well, I kind of like the business. How about if I buy your share? So I bought John out, and then a whole series of events kept going on and on, different locations. So from there, I opened a second store in Egg Harbor, so we had 3 stores going, one in Fish Creek and 2 in Egg Harbor. And I started selling women's clothes, and I soon learned that the women are the shoppers. And to this day, we are largely a women's operation. So from Egg Harbor, I had to go through the history today because I forgot half of this. So from Egg Harbor, I had an opportunity to trade some real estate with Russ Forkert, who owned what you all know as Secondhand Sue's in Sister Bay. So that was my first Sister Bay store. And then a couple years later, another real estate deal. Carol Newman is going to put her grocery store on the market. And at the time, my mom and I were busy selling a lot of the orchard property, and we just happened to have some light industrial property that Carol Newman needed for her son-in-law to operate his business. So we did another real estate trade. The Sister Bay building was a real estate trade. This was a real estate trade. So my mom is my partner, and we opened up the store in 1997. I think it was 97. And then we all knew, or many of us knew and loved Gary and Ann Norris at the grocery store. And for like 3 years, Gary would say, you really need to buy this building. You really need to buy this building. So we opened that building. And then a friend of mine, Jim Sarkis, says, I got a great deal for you in Sturgeon Bay. So we ended up buying the movie theater, never thinking we'd put another clothing store in. Always the plan was to rent these buildings out. We could never find a tenant. So on comes on deck Sturgeon Bay. And then my good friend Rob Serra, president of Bay Lake Bank, convinced me that I needed to buy the old Bunda building back. I don't know if all of you remember what Sister Bay was like, but it was a ghost town. There were empty stores, businesses were not downtown. It was a very quiet time. The zoning authority removed all parking restrictions, so it would be easy for people to open businesses. So we bought the old Bunda store back and figured I would maybe take one unit and rent the rest of the building out. Well, so here we are occupying the whole building. So it's been quite a journey, but a little bit about department stores. So it was a neat store, Bunda store in Sister Bay. That's the store I remember. But my Uncle Jack and Aunt Pat had the vision, and my Uncle Bill, they had the vision to see the tourist market, and they opened the hutch, and that's really the business I'm in today. You guys started that.
Yes, we did.
Very, very successful.
Yes.
So it's been a fun ride, and you know, building buildings, remodeling buildings. I am getting kind of tired though, so I think we're at the end of our stretch. But I just wanted to say a couple little memories of what it was like to grow up here. My favorite TV show, and my cousin Kenneth's, Andy Mayberry. We scheduled college classes around when Andy was playing.
Okay.
Andy Mayberry in Sister Bay in the 60s, Sister Bay was a special place. Small grocery stores, Happy Herman's Market, Joe DeLuise Fish Market. Joe was famous for selling week-old Chicago Tribunes to the tourists. And as a young kid, you looked inside and there was footprints going up the wall, and you'd look at the footprints and you look, and there was a sign up that said, "What the hell are you looking up here for?" Joe was quite a character for those that you knew. It was a special time. Life evolved around being at the beach. And my grandpa's boathouse, which Janie mentioned, was very special. And inside the boathouse was the bunny and the runabout. What was the name of the runabout?
Buddy, too.
Bunny 2. And for me as a kid, when that big garage door would open and you'd see Doug Carlson's yellow Jeep on the dock, you knew he was getting the motors ready for the summer. It was a special memory. And then, as a kid, over to Johnny's Cottage Restaurant, we'd go for 35 cents. I mean, how old am I? 35 cents for a bag of French fries. We'd sit on the beach and eat French fries. And, of course, Al Johnson's Swedish Restaurant, I always used to go over there, sit at the counter. If you weren't full on the first order of pancakes, the second one was free. I often had 2 orders of pancakes, and I was a chubby kid. And then in would walk Al, this domineering figure. Who makes better pancakes, your grandma or me? I like them both. And Andy and Jane aren't here tonight, but I guess Joe Hendrickson's gas station, sitting in the gas station for hours on end at nights, watching cars go through town and sitting on Joe and Louise's front porch. And then Joe offering a little color as the cars would go by in certain individuals. He was quite a character. So it was a special time, and it's still a special place. Thank you.
Thanks again, everybody. This was just I'm just tingling from how much this touches keystones or my short life up here. I've only been here 30 years, but a lot of things Mitch talked about. God, 1997, I was here. It's hard to remember that. You know, it was like Sister Bay was really not doing great at one point, but look at it today. It's pretty amazing. So thanks for coming this evening. The next event is, does somebody have the program?
It's right up there.
Oh, there it is. Okay. So the next program is coming up with the
Razors.
Razors, July 12th. Same place, same time, and we hope you'll come.
Are these all Thursdays?
They're largely, not entirely, Thursdays or Tuesdays.
Tuesday, okay.
Yep.
And we do have that as a paper pickup back there, right? They can pick that up?
Yes.
To look at the schedule?
Yeah, I encourage you to pick up. There's free paper. And
Anything
there's
back there.
There's a number of things back there. Yeah.
I'd like to see Al's program.
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks again. What a great turnout. It seems like everybody is really interested, appreciated. Have a good evening.